Developing news coming out in the past couple of hours today, September the 15th, 2025, as we are hearing that Russia has made the announcement that NATO is at war with them, and we're hearing that this is going to be World War III. Let's take a look at the latest headlines so you can see it for yourself. Now, Putin's spokesman makes a chilling World War III comment as NATO, they say, is at war with Russia. Take a look at the headlines. NATO is at war with Russia, the Kremlin says, and a lot of people are concerned about this because this will directly involve the United States. And we had heard that the U.S. had just come out, I let you know yesterday, warned against this and said, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. Now, take a look at some more of the headlines with me. Representative Cole said he was going to retire yesterday, but the GOP hawk worries about World War III after the Russian escalation that has currently launched. In addition to that, take a look. Longtime GOP lawmaker says, we've never seen anything like this. He warns Trump of World War III. Now, take a look at this. As I mentioned to you, we actually have seen Article 5 already initiated. World War III fear is real. You can see this came out about 5 days ago when we saw those drone attacks enter into Poland. What will happen if Russia-Poland conflict activates NATO Article 4 and 5? 4 has already been initiated, which means that the NATO nations are coming together saying, do we need to unify globally against Russia for what is currently taking place? Now, Russia warns of World War III. You can see this coming out today, September the 15th. NATO, no-fly zone over Ukraine. This will trigger an even bigger war. Also, Russia versus NATO. Poland, UK, France, Germany, Denmark, Romania, Ukraine. Are we witnessing World War III in Europe launching right now? And you can see the date on this, September the 15th, 2025. This is coming out today. Are we witnessing World War III in Europe? What are the roles of the United States and China? Let me know in the comments. Are we entering World War III right now? If so, put WWIII in the comments. I've heard some people say it started years ago when Russia invaded Ukraine. It is just now starting to get global. Now, in addition to that, we're hearing that the United States, take a look at this, dated September the 15th, 2025, flexes its military muscle against emerging threat in the Arctic. And guess who that is? That is Russia and China. We're hearing the United States is flexing because they know potentially we could be going to war here very soon. Now take a look. The U.S. is observing the Belarus-Russia war games as NATO allies feel the heat of Moscow's incursions. We heard these were nuclear threats, nuclear warnings. In addition to that, we saw just about a week or so ago, China host 20 adversarial nations of the United States in a celebration of the 80th anniversary of World War II. Donald Trump called them out, said, I know you are conspiring against the U.S., bringing all of the enemies of us together. And he has since, we've heard, ordered the Pentagon to start restructuring the U.S. armed forces. And take a look at this. Also, breaking news coming out today, U.S. military has now killed 3 in a second deadly strike against narco-terrorists in international waters. Another Venezuelan drug boat bombed today. Now, I'm going to get you caught up on the latest coming out, and you saw the dates. September the 15th, 2025, there is a lot circulating right now about the conflict between Russia, NATO, the involvement of the United States, China. Where do we go from here? I'm going to share with you the latest video footage, the articles, so you can see it for yourself. Now, before we dive in, do me a favor. If you appreciate the fact that I'm going to put this on the screen, read right from it. I cite all the sources. They're going to be hyperlinked in the description. I'm going to play for you the video footage so you can see the latest that is going on right now. If you appreciate that, before we dive in, take a quick second, hit that thumbs up like button for me. It helps spread this out further across the YouTube platform while we're live so more people can get the latest updated information. And to stay up to date, it's totally free. Why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell. I appreciate it a ton. And I saw people asking, what should we do to prepare? And, you know, I haven't mentioned this in a while, but I have a stockpile list down below. Iodide potassium tablets to protect against potential radiation exposure, an assortment of different things to stockpile just in case, EMP-proof fabrics, materials, things to protect your vehicles, to protect your devices, just in case there was some sort of detonation. I saw somebody asking in the comments before the live, reminded me to mention those are down below as well. Amazon links, you can click them and go check them out if you are interested. But Let's go ahead and dive into this so that way you can see exactly what's going on. And let's start off with some video footage, and then we'll get to the articles so you can get the latest updated information.
This morning, as Russia steps up its aggression, President Trump is raising new conditions for tough sanctions on Moscow.
But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil. And the sanctions that they're putting on are not tough enough. And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
Trump saying he'll sanction Russia, but only if NATO countries do the same, and agree to impose sanctions on China, an unlikely scenario. He's also demanding NATO members stop buying Russian oil and gas.
This is, in a way, a bit of an empty threat.
For weeks, the president has threatened Russia with economic consequences, but never followed through, blowing past his own deadlines. On Capitol Hill, the pressure growing from some Republicans who say it's time to act now.
I think appropriate sanctions on Russia are far overdue.
It comes as tension is running high in Eastern Europe. Russia and Belarus holding joint military exercises, as Romania Saturday scrambled fighter jets after Russian drones violated their airspace, the second incursion over a NATO country in less than a week. Just days earlier, Poland forced to shoot down more than a dozen Russian drones that crossed into the country's airspace. Trump has downplayed Russia's drone incursion.
Could have been a mistake. Could have been a mistake.
But Poland insists it was deliberate. Texas Congressman Michael McCall telling ABC he believes it was too.
With all deference to the president, I don't think that was a mistake. I think Putin is testing the resolve of NATO.
It's been 1 month since Trump rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin in Alaska, promising he would face severe sanctions if he didn't agree to a ceasefire. Since then, though, Putin has only escalated the war. And Russia is also, of course, still slow-walking any hopes for peace talks, despite President Trump announcing weeks ago that arrangements were beginning to be made for Putin to finally sit down and talk with Ukrainian President Zelensky. President Trump now conceding this is proving to be more difficult than he initially thought it would be, George.
And Mary, the president making new threats to send troops into American cities.
Yeah, the president is once again escalating his use of the military on U.S. soil. This time, though, he's targeting a Republican state, announcing he's going to be sending in the National Guard to Memphis, saying only he can save the city from crime. The Republican governor is welcoming this deployment, but the Democratic mayor of the city says he doesn't need this, doesn't want it, doesn't think it will bring down crime there. Meanwhile, here in D.C., the president is again threatening to declare a national emergency if local police refuse to cooperate with immigration enforcement, George.
Right.
There you have it, you guys. Let me know your thoughts. I heard them discussing how Donald Trump is currently handling this and also domestic issues, as we're hearing the National Guard is going to be going to Memphis, Tennessee to help clean up the city like we saw with Washington, D.C. And if you approve of Donald Trump and what he's been doing, you like the job that he is doing so far as President of the United States, do me a favor, drop a 47 in the comments for support for Donald Trump and all the effort that he has been putting in. But we are hearing that right now he is struggling to try to get Vladimir Putin on board with some sort of ceasefire agreement, and we're hearing that things are actually just escalating, and he is now vocalizing his frustration with Putin, as he thought that this was going to be something they'd be able to work out, but he's saying that it seems like the same day that they're discussing what appears to be a negotiation deal, an agreement, that same day later on he finds out that Vladimir Putin has ordered bigger strikes, more strikes against Ukraine, and things are just intensifying. And now we're hearing that Poland and Romania have gotten into the middle of this, and they are concerned about where this is going to be going. Article 4 has been initiated, and there's concerns that this is going to expand into a global conflict. Let's take a look at some more video footage.
Joining me now is the former Senior Director for National Security Council and Principal Architect of the Abraham Accords, Robert Greenway. Robert, thank you so much for being here. First, I want to get your take on Poland taking down Russian drones. Now, the Secretary of State just there with me earlier this morning said that they were, quote-unquote, duds. There was not any ammunition in the drones, but it was a message to NATO. They wanted to test NATO to see if there would be a reaction. Your reaction?
Well, thanks for having me, Maria. I think the Secretary's exactly right. This is no mistake. The number, the sheer quantity that crossed the border, the fact that they were unarmed, apparently without an explosive payload, indicates that this was a deliberate decision to increase negotiating leverage. And attacks overall in this year are 9 times what they were year to date last year. all of which I think indicates that that President Putin is trying to increase his negotiating leverage. I think it's going to backfire, and he's managed to place great distance between himself and President Trump, and in the process is going to find increased economic and military pressure against him. And I think that's what you can expect from the president during his state visit to the UK.
Well, I mean, these are very dangerous exercises, obviously, given Article 5 that says if you invade one NATO country, the entire bloc will respond. Robert, are you expecting a response here? I mean, obviously, Vladimir Putin is testing the world.
Oh, there's no question. I think President Trump doesn't get enough credit for already applying economic pressure, dropping Russia's GDP growth from 4.5% last year to 1.5%. Most of that done by lowering the price of oil, from which Russia derives most of its export revenue. But I think you can expect increased commitment, not just from NATO partners agreeing to 5% of their defense spending, but also an increased commitment of U.S. sales purchased by European partners that'll find themselves in Ukrainian hands. And so I think Putin is overplaying his hand, and I think he's going to pay the price for it.
Yeah, and that's basically what we heard from the Secretary of State, Marcin Serdach from Poland just a few minutes ago. Robert, you are also celebrating and marking the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords, which...
There you have it, you guys. Now, let me know your thoughts. They are saying that Poland is saying that Russia's drones that entered into their airspace was done intentionally, that they are poking at them to see if they're prepared for the war to expand to other nations. Russia is claiming that it was totally an accident. We actually saw the video footage where Donald Trump said perhaps it was an accident. Poland is saying, no, this was no accident. Russia is testing us. Let me know your thoughts. And now today we are hearing that Russian spokesperson Dmitry Medvedev has said NATO is at war with Russia. There's no mistaking it. The time has come. We're at war. And we're hearing as we speak, Article 4 has been initiated by NATO. Let's take a look at the headlines so that way you can see it for yourself. Take a look here. Putin's spokesman makes a chilling World War III comment as NATO is at war with Russia. The Kremlin spokesman claims of a de facto war between Moscow and NATO comes as the alliance scrambled jets after Russian drone violations over Poland and Romania. So we're hearing two nations now scrambling in response to what they think could be the beginning of Russia pulling them into all-out war. September the 15th, 2025. Now, the article says NATO countries are at war with Russia over Ukraine, the spokesman for Russian President Vladimir Putin has said. NATO is at war with Russia. This is spoken today. Dmitry Peskov told Russian state media on Monday. This is obvious, and it does not require any additional evidence. NATO provides direct and indirect support for the Kiev regime. Peskov's comments reiterated a familiar Kremlin narrative that Western backing of Ukraine amounts to active participation in the conflict. Tensions soared last week between NATO's Eastern European allies and Russia. A total of 19 Russian drones flew over Poland overnight on Wednesday. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said, adding that at least 3 were shot down by Polish and NATO aircrafts. Now, this situation brings us the closest that we have been to open conflict since World War II. We're hearing that a lot of the things that are happening right now are reminiscent of World War II, says Tusk. The incident marked the first time Russian drones were downed over NATO territory since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022. In response to the incursion, Warsaw invoked NATO's Article 4 on Thursday. So that is why we are seeing World War III everywhere, because as of Thursday of last week, we have seen Article 4 invoked, which means NATO nations are coming together and deciding, are all of us, including the United States, about to go to war against the threat of Russia, which calls for the discussion among allies over the threats of territorial security. This is a step short of Article 5, which will then require the collective military defenses from allies if a member state is attacked. So right now, Poland is initiating Article 4. We could be seeing 5, where all nations will go to war against that opposing threat, which is Russia. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski described the drone attacks as a test of the alliance's resolve by Russia. So Poland is saying this was no accident. Russia is testing NATO right now. Now, just days later, on Saturday, a Russian drone entered Romanian airspace during an attack on Ukraine. Bucharest scrambled 2 F-16 fighter jets, which, along with 2 German Eurofighter Typhoons, tracked the drone for 50 minutes over NATO territory before it headed towards Ukrainian airspace, according to Romania's defense ministry. The Russian ambassador to Bucharest was summoned in protest over what Romanian Foreign Minister Oan Toi called a violation of Romania's sovereignty. The UK Foreign Office also commended Russia's unprecedented violation of Polish and Romanian airspace, branding the incursions utterly unacceptable. Meanwhile, NATO announced plans to deploy more fighter jets to its eastern flank, aiming to protect member states from future drone attacks. Notably, the alliance has not directly intervened in the war in Ukraine, a move that Russia, which fiercely opposes Kiev's bid for NATO membership, would consider a major provocation. It comes after the UK Prime Minister announced today that Britain will destroy RAF Typhoon jets to Poland, will deploy RAF Typhoon jets to Poland, joining NATO's Eastern Sentry mission in response to Russia's increased aggression. In an interview with Channel 4 News, Sir Keir Starmer said, "That is the right thing to do. The wrong thing to do would be to ignore this increased aggression from Russian President Vladimir Putin from Russia, because this wasn't a one-off. You saw only a few weeks ago the bombing of the British Council in Kiev, the attacking of the EU embassy, and the direct hits on the Council of Ministers in Kiev itself." So there you have it. We're hearing that the warnings are coming out. NATO is coming together. Poland is saying that they are preparing for potential all-out war with Russia versus NATO, and Russia coming out today and saying it is obvious NATO is at war with Russia. This is the beginning of World War III. Now, take a look at this one coming out from Newsweek. NATO is at war with Russia, the Kremlin says, coming out today. NATO is at war with Russia over Ukraine. The spokesman for Russian President Vladimir Putin has said. The comments by Dmitry Peskov come amid a spike in tensions between the alliance and Moscow following Poland's shooting down of Russian drones that entered the alliance members' airspace last week. Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski said at the time that the drone incursion was a ploy by Russia to test the alliance. So they are initially saying that this was just a test. Now, Poland is saying they're not having any of it, that this was them intentionally doing this. Russia saying it was a mistake. Peskov said Monday today that it was obvious that the alliance was de facto involved in this war. Newsweek has contacted NATO for comments. Here's why it matters. NATO has directly entered the war, nor are its troops deployed to fight. NATO has not directly entered the war, nor are its troops deployed to fight. But Peskov's comments echo those made by the Kremlin and its supporters, who refer to the assistance Kiev has received from NATO allies, including the United States. His comments highlighted the friction between Moscow and NATO as concerns grow. Russia is testing the alliance's resolve, with tensions heightened further after Romania said that it had deployed fighter jets in response to another incursion of its airspace. So here's what to know. Peskov suggested that a de facto war between Moscow and NATO was underway. Warsaw has triggered NATO's Article 4, alerting fellow allies to a significant threat to its territorial integrity and formally starting the consultations on how to respond in response to the recent Russian drone incursion into Poland, which Moscow says lacks evidence. So just to clarify, Article 4 of NATO, it has officially been initiated. They have started the consultations, which is why we are seeing World War III headlines left and right, concerns about all of NATO going to war. This step is less severe than invoking Article 5, though, which obliges allies to collectively defend if one of them comes under armed attack. But on the heels of the alarm raised by that incident, another NATO member, Romania, has now scrambled F-16 fighter jets on Saturday after a Russian drone breached its airspace, which has become a frequent occurrence in this war. The Russian ambassador to Bucharest was summoned over the violations of Romania's sovereignty, said Romanian Foreign Minister Oan Toi. The UK Foreign Office said on Monday today that the Russian ambassador to London had been summoned following Moscow's unprecedented violations of Polish and Romanian airspace, describing the incursion as utterly unacceptable. Meanwhile, Lithuania and Poland, they have deployed extra troops along their borders in response to the joint military drills between Bucharest and Russia, the so-called Zapata 2025 war games that began on Friday. Poland's foreign minister Sikorski said Russia had tried to test NATO's reactions by small escalations without prompting a full-scale response. Michael Butler, political science professor at Clark University, told Newsweek the deployment of Russian drones into Poland's airspace was the opening salvo of a new front in Moscow's ongoing hybrid war against the West. He said the use of drones and disinformation were designed to probe Poland's potentially security vulnerabilities while simultaneously buffering the country with confusing and false reports about the strike and its effects via social media. So here's what people are saying. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said NATO is at war with Russia. This is obvious and it does not require any additional evidence. NATO provides direct and indirect support to the Kiev regime. Chrissy Miller, thank you for the $2 super chat. She says, make sure you guys are prepping. Reading on, Michael Butler, professor and chair of the Department of Political Science at Clark University, told Newsweek the synchronized use of drones and disinformation were clearly designed to probe Poland's potential security vulnerabilities. The brazen use of these tactics against Poland should sound alarm bells for NATO and the United States. So here's what happens next. NATO has said that it would deploy more jets to the alliance's eastern flank to protect against future drone attacks, but the expectation among the bloc will be that further devices will enter its territory, which could further inflame the tensions. So there you have it, another headline of concern. NATO going to war with Russia, World War III. And as I mentioned just yesterday, we had received U.S. warnings about where we were going to be going as a nation into a conflict of potentially World War III. Representative McCall will retire, but the GOP hawk worries about World War III after Russian escalation. Now, this article says Representative Mike McCall of Texas, one of the GOP's most prominent foreign affairs hawks, announced on Sunday yesterday that he'll retire while warning that with Russia's escalation of its invasion of Ukraine, we've got to be very careful not to be on the precipice of World War III. McCall made his statements to ABC News as he discussed this past week's incursion into Polish airspace of Russian drones, which led to NATO scrambling jets to intercept them. Russia said the intrusion was an error, but Poland and other European countries said they had no doubts that it was intentional. President Donald Trump said it could have been a mistake, as you just saw in that video footage. Andrew, thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, we need to show them instead of talk about it. Thank you for that, Andrew. And we're going to be seeing where we go from here. I will keep you up to date. Reading on, it says, McCall said the incursion was a cause for alarm. And a lot of people saying this was a crossing of the line. What happened last week as we saw Russia enter into Polish airspace. We've never seen anything like this in recent times, the congressman said. And so what I'm concerned about is that this escalation here and the temperature rising, we've got to be very careful not to be on the precipice of World War III. McCall has long pushed Trump to take a tougher stance on Russia and its invasion of Ukraine. And he said he thinks the president is waking up to see that Russian President Vladimir Putin, he is not negotiating in good faith. Trump has repeatedly praised Putin over the years and moved to cut off military aid to Ukraine. Though he's reversed course and supported a new increase, he invited Putin to Alaska for discussions last month about a ceasefire in Ukraine. But the Russian president has yet to commit to one. I think he's manipulating the president as a KGB officer would, McCall said of Putin, who used to work for the Soviet intelligence service. The more Putin irritates the president, I think the better that we are in terms of defending NATO and Ukraine. A former anti-terrorism prosecutor and past chairman of the House Homeland Security and Foreign Affairs Committee, McCall, 63, is a part of an older generation of foreign policy hawks who've tried to counter a younger crop of Republicans who are more skeptical about U.S. intervention elsewhere in the world. McCall becomes one of at least 10 House members leaving the chamber without seeking higher office, a tally that includes fellow GOP hawk Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska, who's been increasingly critical of Trump's response to Putin. McCall said that he would finish his term but not seek re-election next year. I'm looking for a new challenge in the same space that would be national security, foreign policy, but just in a different realm, he said. So there you have it. He's going to be leaving that office, and as he goes out, he is giving that warning. And there you can see another headline coming out where he says, we've never seen anything like this. Gives the warnings of World War III. Now, let me know your thoughts. Do you think we're going to be entering World War III? We're going to be taking a look at some more articles here in just a second, but drop in the comments for me, are we going to see war or peace? Is NATO going to go to war with Russia, including the United States, or are we going to be able to de-escalate the tensions? War or peace? Drop it in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. But let's take a look at some more of this. Now, as I mentioned, Article 4 has already been initiated, which is the negotiations of NATO nations as to whether or not they need to move forward to address a potential threat. Let's take a look at this. World War III related apprehensions have begun as Russia-Ukraine's war seems to be escalated after Russian drones violated Polish airspace. NATO chief Mark Rutte on Wednesday slammed Moscow's reckless behavior and hailed the alliance's very successful reaction to counter the incursion. Russia RIA, state news agency, quoted a Russian diplomat as calling the accusations of an incursion groundless and saying Poland had not given any evidence that the drones shot down were of Russian origin. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said today that he had asked NATO to open consultations under Article 4 of the alliance's treaty after Poland shot down drones in its airspace, following what he called a large-scale provocation by Russia. To Putin, my message is clear. Stop the war in Ukraine. Stop the escalating war, which he is now basically mounting on innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure. NATO chief Mark Rutte said, stop violating Allied airspace and know that we stand ready, that we are vigilant, and that we will defend every inch of NATO territory. And that is the same statement that we heard coming out from the United States as well. So, let's take a look here a little bit more on this. Poland said that it has downed 19 drones over its territory during a large Russian air attack on Ukraine, the first time a NATO member state is known to have fired shots in the war. Several European officials described the incursion as intentional and a sign of Russian escalation. Article 4 states that members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, they will consult together whenever, if the opinion of any of them, the territory, political independence, or security of any of them is threatened. Under Article 4, discussions at the North Atlantic Council, NATO's principal political decision-making body, could potentially lead to some form of a joint decision of action. Now, since NATO's creation in 1949, Article 4 has been invoked 7 times, most recently in February of 2022, when Bulgaria and the Czech Republic, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia sought consultations following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. NATO ambassadors in November of 2022 held an emergency meeting after a missile strike killed 2 people in Poland and raised global alarm that the war could spill into neighboring countries. If Russia were determined to have attacked the territory of a member state, the focus would then shift to Article 5, the cornerstone of the founding treaty of NATO. The alliance was created in 1949 with the United States military as its powerful mainstay, essentially to counter the Soviet Union and its Eastern Bloc satellite during the Cold War. Now, the charter stipulates that the parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. They agree that if such an armed attack occurs, each of them, in exercise of the right of individual or collective self-defense, recognizes Article 5 of the Charter of the United Nations. This will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking forthwith, individually, and in concert with the other parties, such actions as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic areas, it says. Now, since Ukraine is not part of NATO, Russia's full-scale invasion in February of 2022 did not trigger Article 5, though the United States and other members states rushed to provide military and diplomatic assistance to Kiev. However, experts have long warned of potential, for a spillover to neighboring countries on NATO's eastern flank that could force the alliance to respond militarily. Such actions by Russia, either intentional or accidental, has raised the risk of widening the war by drawing other countries directly into the conflict. Following attack on a member state, the others could come together to determine whether they agree to regard it as an Article 5 situation. There is no time limit on how long such consultations could take, and experts say the language is flexible enough to allow each member to decide how far to go in responding to armed aggression against another. Article 5 has been activated once before on behalf of the United States in response to the September 11, 2001 hijacked plane attacks on New York and Washington. So, wow, there you have it. Article 4 has been initiated. We're going to see if we go to Article 5 or if we're going to be able to de-escalate the situation. Now, in addition to that, take a look at this article coming out today. Russia has also warned of World War III. NATO no-fly zone over Ukraine would trigger a bigger war. Now, a senior Russian security official has warned that any NATO-enforced no-fly zone over Ukraine would amount to a declaration of war and could set off direct conflicts between Russia and the alliance, ratcheting up tensions already spurred by a recent wave of cross-border drone incursions. So just left and right, warnings coming out in about the last 48 hours. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chair of Russia's Security Council, wrote that he was amused by NATO's new posture strengthening initiative, Eastern Century, but added that the implementation of the provocation idea of creating a no-fly zone over Ukraine and the ability for NATO countries to shoot down our UAVs will mean only one thing: a war between NATO and Russia. So Dmitry Medvedev coming out and essentially laughing at NATO, saying, "I'm amused by your posturing as if you're going to go to war with Russia." He said that this would only mean that you will be destroyed by us. We will go to war and we will take you down. Medvedev, who has served as the country's president as well as prime minister, said Russia will do so in all possible ways and in all possible international and national courts as well. Medvedev's comments came as NATO announced a step-up multi-domain activity to bolster defenses along its eastern flank in response to a recent incursion of Russian drones into NATO airspace. Now, NATO officials said Eastern Sentry, coordinated by Ally Command Operations, brings together air, sea, land, and other capabilities and will start in the coming days for an undisclosed period. The move, they said, is a direct response to ongoing airspace violations, including the multiple drones that entered Polish airspace, and is intended to reassure allies and deter further spillover. NATO leaders told reporters that the activity is flexible and emphasizes the integrated air policing and counter-drone capacities, drawing on fighter jets and allied support across the eastern flank. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov echoed the hard line in blunt language, accusing NATO of already being de facto involved in this war because of its direct and indirect support for Kiev, as we just read a little while ago. Russia coming out and saying NATO has already gone to war against Russia, and Russia saying we are justified in stepping up our responses. Head of Ukraine's presidential office, Andrei Yermak, said that the recent drone incursion into Poland proved the need to create a no-fly zone over his country. This will be protection, not only for us, but also for all neighbors, he added. The debate was touched off by a high-profile incident on September 10th, when Polish officials reported that aerial objects violated Polish airspace during a large Russian strike campaign against targets in Ukraine. Polish and NATO aircraft scrambled, Poland said that several of the objects were shot down and described the event as an unprecedented provocation. NATO and partner countries have since responded with reinforced patrols and the launch of Operation Eastern Sentry. Now, why a no-fly zone is so sensitive? Western leaders have long warned that such actions could place NATO forces in direct combat with Russian air assets, risking escalation to a broader conflict. Past assessments concluded that the enforcing of a no-fly zone over Ukraine could draw the alliance into direct military confrontation with Moscow. So things are escalating, and there are concerns, as you can see, headline after headline, of World War III, all of these coming out in the last 24 to 48 hours. Here's another one coming out today. Russia versus NATO, Poland, UK, France, Germany, Denmark, Romania, Ukraine. Are we witnessing World War III? What are the roles of the United States and China? Now, we had heard a spokesperson for the U.S. come out and say the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory. Do you think that the U.S. is going to be going to war here very soon? If so, put yes. If no, put no. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think that Donald Trump will support our NATO allies, or is he going to say, forget NATO, we're not going to be a part of this war? Let me know your thoughts. Now, we also saw him put that ultimatum on them saying, if you are going to do this, you need to stop buying Russian oil. Put you in a very bad negotiating position when you're threatening to go to war with somebody that you're buying oil from. Let me know your thoughts. Now, this article says that NATO member countries and European nations are reportedly mounting pressure on Russia and President Vladimir Putin as tensions have run high in Eastern Europe's skies since more than a dozen Russian drones entered Polish airspace last week. Now, the UK has said that Royal Air Force Typhoons will join Allied forces, including from Denmark, France, and Germany, to bolster NATO's defense and deterrence along its eastern flank, adding that the jets were due to fly missions over Poland in the coming days. The Kremlin said on Monday that it was obvious that NATO was fighting against Russia. Again, that just coming out in the past couple of hours. The headlines everywhere. Russia is saying NATO is at war with Russia by providing direct and indirect support to Ukraine. U.S. military officials in Russia-Belarus war games. U.S. military officers observed joint war games between Russia and Belarus on Monday and were told by Belarusian Defense Minister Viktor Kremlin that they could look at whatever is of interest for you. Now, Russia and Belarus began the Zapad 2025 exercise at training grounds in both countries on Friday at a time of heightened tensions with NATO, 2 days after Poland shot down Russian drones that crossed into its airspace. The attendance of the Americans at the training ground in Belarus was presented by the country's defense ministry as a surprise. Russia says it's war against NATO. Now, the European Union's foreign policy chief on Sunday accused Moscow of reckless escalation after a Russian drone flew through Romania's airspace, the second incursion over a NATO country in less than a week. Russian drone incursions into Polish airspace last week, prompting NATO to scramble fighter jets to shoot some of them down. That incident drew condemnation from Western officials who called it an escalation of war in Ukraine. Taken together, the episodes further underscore how drones are making the Ukraine war felt outside the country's borders. Romania, a NATO member, had said late on Sunday that its Air Force had detected a Russian drone in the country's airspace. Its defense ministry said in a statement that the country had deployed 2 F-16 aircrafts shortly after 6 p.m. local time to monitor Russian airstrikes on Ukrainian infrastructure near the Romanian border. About 20 minutes later, they detected the drone in Romanian airspace. NATO is de facto involved in this war. NATO is providing direct and indirect support to the Kiev regime. It can be said with absolute certainty that NATO is fighting against Russia, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters. Now, China will be backing Russia. So those that are saying that we're going to be going into World War III here. If you're wondering what nation will be siding with which, what are the alliances going to be, we're hearing that China will be supporting Russia. China on Monday described as a typical act of unilateral bullying and economic coercion the U.S. call to G7 and NATO countries to impose tariffs against Beijing and others importing Russian oil, as it threatened countermeasures if Washington's call is heeded. China's rejection of the U.S. push came even as the Chinese and U.S. delegation reconvened in Spain on Monday for the second day of their talks on economic and trade issues. At a regular news briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jiang said China's normal economic and energy cooperation with countries around the world, including Russia, is legitimate, lawful, and above reproach. He made the remarks when asked to comment on reports that the U.S. has asked G7 and NATO members to collectively impose additional tariffs on China for purchasing Russian oil to pressure Beijing to play a role in ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukraine strikes Russia. Now, Ukraine launched a large attack with at least 361 drones targeting Russia overnight, sparking a brief fire at the vast Kerch oil refinery in Russia's northwest. Russian officials said on Sunday, reporting no injuries. Now, Russia's defense ministry said at least 361 drones had been shot down by Russian air defense systems, including 4 guided aerial bombs and a U.S.-made HIMARS missile. It did not give details about the location of the attacks. Now, while Ukraine has repeatedly struck oil refineries and other Russian energy infrastructure, its target Sunday was particularly significant. Kerch is the only major oil refinery in northwestern Russia and is one of the country's largest, producing things like motor fuel, paraffin, and roofing materials. Now, Surgutanakas, I don't even know how to pronounce that. This refinery, one of the top 2 refineries in Russia, was among the target attacked by Ukrainian drones, Russian officials had said. So we are seeing things escalate significantly. The United States will be supporting NATO. China will be supporting Russia. And we're hearing, take a look, the U.S. is flexing its military muscle against emerging threats in the Arctic. And those threats are Russia and China. This coming out today. Take a look at this article with me. The United States and Canadian militaries staged a show of force in the Arctic region earlier this month amid emerging threats as Russia and China challenged the allies. Newsweek has emailed both the Russian and Chinese foreign ministries for comments. Here's why it matters. In recent years, the Arctic has become an emerging zone of global competition, with Russia maintaining a persistent military presence and China expanding its research vessel activity, prompting the U.S. and Canada to strengthen their defense posture. Last year, the Pentagon released an updated Arctic strategy calling for greater military buildup and allied cooperation to counter Russia and China. The U.S. military recently held 2 war games in the region to ensure readiness to deter and to defeat the adversaries. Here's what to know. The U.S. Alaskan Command and the Canadian Armed Forces conducted joint maritime operations in the Bering Sea from September 3rd to the 5th, demonstrating what the command called the rapid employment of a bi-national force to addressing emerging Arctic threats. The Bering Sea between Russia's Far East and Alaska serves as a gateway to the Arctic via the Bering Strait. The U.S. and Canada established the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, to defend North America against attacks. According to the Alaskan Command, the operations aim to showcase U.S.-Canada cooperation and maritime strike capabilities around Alaska through the deployment of American aircrafts, including F-35 stealth jets and the Canadian frigate HMCS Regina. Now, the United States and our allies remain prepared to counter adversary attempts to expand influence or military capabilities in the Western Hemisphere and the Arctic region, the Lieutenant General Case Cunningham, head of the Alaskan Command. Rear Admiral Jose Kurtz, Canada's Maritime Component Commander, said Canada and the U.S. face similar threats to their national security and prosperity. The Regina is part of Canadian forces deployed to monitor the West Arctic for continental defense. Meanwhile, the U.S. Coast Guard updated on Chinese research vessel activities in the Arctic. Its icebreaker, the U.S. CGC Storis, responded to the Chinese vessel GD and Zhulong 2 on September 5th and 9th, respectively, while operating north of the Bering Strait. So there you have it, the United States not just sitting idly, but also responding, showing their muscle as well, flexing. And as we heard from those other articles, we are also seeing the U.S. is watching and observing Belarus, Russia war games as NATO allies feel the heat of Moscow's incursion. And you can see this just coming out 2 hours ago. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. The U.S. NATO allies, as U.S. NATO allies in Europe are feeling the pressure from Moscow, putting them on edge in an already febrile atmosphere with Russian drones entering Poland's airspace. Russia and its main ally, Belarus, are conducting massive military drills right on the alliance's doorstep. The exercises, called the Zapad 2025, are taking place at training grounds in Russia and Belarus, which both border Ukraine, as well as in the waters of the Baltic and the Barents Seas. A delegation of U.S. military officers, as well as representatives of 2 other NATO members, Turkey and Hungary, observed the drills, joined by Russian Deputy Defense Minister Yunusbek Yevkurkov. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Brian Shoup was one of the 2 U.S. officers who were seen meeting with Belarusian military officials in videos shared by Minsk. In the video, Shoup could be heard thanking the Belarusian officials in Russia for the invitation. The U.S. President Donald Trump, who initially responded to the Russian drone incursion into Poland with bemusement, saying, "What's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones?" suggested last week that they could have been a mistake. In another indication of developing ties between Minsk and Washington, Belarus released 52 political prisoners after senior Trump administration official John Kohl met with the Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko and delivered a letter and a gift of cufflinks featuring an image of the White House from Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump. In response to the prisoner release, a Trump administration official said the U.S. would ease some sanctions on Belarus state-run airline Belavia. Just days after, more than a dozen Russian drones penetrated Poland's airspace, causing NATO jets to scramble and shoot them down. Romania said another drone crossed its borders at the weekend. So wow, just absolutely incredible. Let me know your thoughts on this. As we're seeing, it appears that the United States is being allowed to come in as a friend, as an ally. They're making ties with Belarus, and then literally days later, moments later, we're seeing massive attacks taking place, flexing of their war games, entering into Polish and Romanian airspace. And as Donald Trump said, it appears that then the same day, Putin will say, yes, we're going to reach a deal, an agreement, things are going well. And then later on that exact same day, we'll launch the largest attack so far in the war. Where do you think we're going to be going from here? Are we going to be entering into war? Let me know your thoughts. While the U.S. European allies have called for a stronger response from Washington to the drone incursions, Trump appears reluctant to further confront the Kremlin. In a Fox interview Friday, Trump said his patience with Putin was sort of running out and running out fast. Donald Trump is saying he is losing his patience with Putin. As the drills began at a massive compound north of Minsk, Belarusian defense ministers claimed that NATO was panicking in the face of Russian and Belarusian firepower. It's a big mistake from NATO. Valkyrie Ravenko, a senior Belarusian general, told CNN on the training grounds, pointing to the fact that Poland itself has stationed a large number of troops near the border with Belarus for the duration of the drills. Where do you think there is more personnel? Probably over there. Why are 40,000, the reported number of Polish soldiers deployed to the region, afraid of 6,800 Russian and Belarusian troops? This is a good question. Modern combat tactics. The Belarusian military loaded us onto buses and took us deep inside of the Borskiskoye training facility. Drills started with a massive bang when several Russian fighter jets came streaking in at a low level, dropping bombs and mock on mock targets. The two armies then blasted the training area called a polygon, ending with a final massive assault. Moscow has used these exercises to showcase its modernized nuclear capabilities, while the Russians claim fewer than 13,000 troops are taking part in this year's drills, much fewer than in the past. It's the types of weapons used that has European leaders worried. For months, the Russians, they have been outfitting Belarus with tactical nuclear weapons, recently announcing they'd placed their powerful new Orshnik medium-range ballistic missile there. This comes after Russia said it had placed tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus late last year. Russian warships were shown firing Zircon hypersonic missiles in the Barents Sea to the north of Russia, while Moscow's jets flew missions over northwestern Russia and Belarus carrying the Zinkhal air-launched ballistic missile, which the Russians have already used in combat against Ukraine. So there you have it, you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Things escalating significantly, and that is why we are seeing all of these headlines that are coming out with the warnings of World War III coming out here very soon. Let me know your thoughts. Take a look. This coming out today. Putin's spokesperson makes a chilling World War III comment as NATO is at war with Russia. NATO is at war with Russia. The Kremlin says the United States warning about World War III with the current Russian escalation. We've never seen anything like this. We are seeing things escalate and fast. A lot of people saying that World War III started in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine, and now we are finally starting to see all the nations of the world getting pulled into this. Now, that also includes the breaking news coming out today about Venezuela. We saw the U.S. military kill 3 in second deadly strike against narco-terrorists in international waters, Trump said. You can see this article coming out just 3 hours ago. Let's play some video footage for you so you can see this, because we're hearing that Venezuela is also now getting pulled into some of the conflict. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Let's turn our attention right now to more top headlines here on Live Now from Fox as we continue to detail the latest on another kinetic strike of a potential suspected narco-terrorist there in the Caribbean. I do want to put up just this video, or this post on social media, I should say, from the President of the United States talking about this, saying this morning, on my orders, the U.S. military forces conducted a second kinetic strike against positively identified, extraordinarily violent drug trafficking cartels and narco-terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibility. I want to play some of this video out as I read the remainder of the statement here on Live Now from Fox, as he says the strike occurred while these confirmed narco-terrorists from Venezuela were in international waters transporting illegal narcotics headed to the U.S. These extremely violent drug trafficking cartels pose a threat to U.S. national security, foreign policy, and the vital U.S. interest. The strike resulted in 3 male terrorists killed in action. No U.S. forces were harmed in the strike. Be warned, you are transporting drugs that can kill Americans. We are hunting you. The illicit activities by these cartels have wrought devastating consequences on American communities for decades, killing millions of American citizens. No longer. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So, of course, these are some images coming in from Rapid Response 47 talking about their 3 male terrorists killed in action. So that the most recent update from the president on social media, and plenty has been made, as this is not the first strike that we have seen, not the first that we've seen on video. And immediately in the aftermath of the first, I remember there were quite a few questions for White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt about this, the legality of it, how it transpired, how it all went down. So, of course, following the latest on this, as the Venezuelan, both the U.S. military destroyed the Caribbean, altered the course, appeared to potentially have turned around. So following it very closely here on Live Now from Fox, it says a second kinetic strike against a positively identified drug trafficking cartel. So following closely here on Live Now from Fox, a live look there in Washington, D.C. at the White House, and the crackdown on cartels, on different potentially foreign terrorist organizations continues. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this.
And in addition to that, take a look at this. We're hearing that Donald Trump has refused to rule out potentially striking Venezuelan mainland as well. Take a look.
President Trump not ruling out the possibility of strikes on Venezuela's mainland amid rising tensions between the two nations. Madeline Rivera is in Washington with details for us. Hey, Madeline.
This is certainly something to watch, Ainsley. There's been a military buildup in the Caribbean. 5 American F-35 fighter jets were spotted landing in Puerto Rico on Saturday. A source familiar with the issue told Fox earlier this month the Pentagon is deploying 10 stealth fighters to Puerto Rico to fight drug trafficking operations in the region. Now it appears the president is not ruling out the chances that the situation might escalate.
Do you think we will start doing strikes on mainland Venezuela?
But we'll see what happens. Look, Venezuela is sending us their gang members, their drug dealers, and drugs. It's not acceptable.
Tensions with Venezuela have been ramping up after the U.S. conducted a deadly strike in the region on September 2nd against what they say was a drug vessel from Venezuela being operated by a narco-terrorist organization. President Trump has also repeatedly criticized last year's elections in Venezuela, extending Nicolas Maduro's leadership. Yesterday, he also did not rule out the possibility of ousting Maduro. Last week, the president suggested the U.S. is not seeking regime change. Ainsley.
All right, Maddie, thank you so much.
Want even more Fox News and you?
There you have it, you guys. So things are escalating all over around the world. We are getting the World War III warnings that are coming out regarding Russia and NATO. And also today, we saw another boat struck from Venezuela. And you heard Trump saying he's not ruling out direct conflict with Venezuela on the mainland. So there is a lot going on, headlines left and right about NATO going to war with Russia, the United States getting pulled in, China, World War III left and right. I'll continue to keep you up to date. We're going to be seeing where we go from here. But once again, do me a favor, if you haven't done so yet, let me know in the comments, war or peace, what is on the horizon for our world? And do me a favor, while you drop war or peace, take a second if you haven't done so yet and hit that like button. Looks like we just need 25 more likes to hit 2,000 while we're live. We've got about 5,000 people on right now, and I appreciate that. Also, if you want to reference any of the articles, I cite all the sources. They're hyperlinked in the description. You can click them, go read them for yourself, see the dates, see the sources, and know and rest assured that this is the latest. And as more comes out, I'll be sure to report it here on the channel so that way you can know exactly what is going on. So, this is your first time here, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for joining me, you guys. Take care. God bless. This is Steve.